Hi, Grandin here. Continuing today to work on an older Takamine, and this is one of those repairs that most people would probably just live with it as it was and then play the guitar until it died. Not a real bad repair, but typically this kind of repair, when you include the finishing work, would possibly exceed what you could buy another one or even a used one for. So what had happened was somebody kicked holes in both sides of the guitar, and it was because this is a laminate, it's a three-piece laminate, that kind of a break on these where the laminate chunks then, or the pieces then, multiple fractures in the laminate, the layers break in different spots, and I tried to piece those original pieces back together, and they were just broken badly enough that it wasn't going to happen. It was going to be a super ugly repair that we wouldn't be able to do finish work, and getting the pieces to fit back together, it just, easiest thing to do was I measured out the exact, to cut away the most. So I made two templates. This was for the one side where the break was longer, and this was for the other side. The dimensions on this one were 3 1/4 by 4, and this one were 3 by 6 5/8 length. And then I very carefully cut those out to use them for the others. So what I did was that I taped these templates down to the side of the guitar with some tape around the edges, and then drew the line, and then very, very carefully with a small, real small hand saw, cut those out, okay? And that got rid of all of the bad broken wood. So I now have a nice clean shape to repair. And again, this is probably not the way you do it on a solid body guitar or a solid wood sides, where it's easier to patch those in and with solid wood make a repair that works, versus on the laminates it just breaks ugly, and each layer breaks differently because of the opposing grain and what have you. And this way is probably a little less expensive to go. And also because it's laminate, what I'm going to do to make the new pieces that I'll put in, which is what I'm going to use these pieces for that I cut out, is I do have another inexpensive guitar that is a laminate that's kind of like beyond repair, and it was donated because they didn't really want it anymore. Needs a neck reset and a bunch of other work. But what I can do, because it's already, the sides are pre-bent, is I can then cut these pieces from the side of that guitar and then patch them in. And then do all the fill work and refinishing work necessary to make the guitar playable. And again, this is, guitar has a lot of sentimental value, so rather than getting another one, she wants this one fixed. That's the right answer, as long as she knows going in. So what I'm going to do today then is, because it's such a big surface around, area around this, is I've got this, super high quality maple hardwood plywood that is only, boy, this stuff is less than 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's 3 layers. So what I'm going to do is take it over to my big drum sander and take this is, it's about right about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, it is 1/8. So I'm going to take, it's 3 layers, with the center layer being the thickest. The 2 outer layers are a 32nd, and the inside is a 16th. So I'm going to take one of the outer layers off, and then about half that inner layer to get down to just a 16th of an inch thick 2-layer ply. It'll be easier to bend and easier to put in place. I've already got my lines, my shapes drawn out, because what I'm going to do is cut a little bigger around that and then a little smaller on the inside to basically make an O-ring that I can glue on the inside, and then use this to put these pieces in and have a solid gluing surface to make sure that it bends and conforms to the shape of the guitar going in. All right. Typically with a smaller break like this, you could use a couple cleats, but I really want to get a solid gluing surface to hold the whole thing in and reinforce it. So I'm just going to take this over, run it through the drum sander, and then I'll come in and cut these out, and then we'll try fitting one of them in place. See you in a bit. All right, here we are at my 16-inch drum sander. The end is open, so you could run as wide as a 32-inch bore through it. I use this for making my own thin woods, dimensioning figured woods where the sander won't do tear out on flame and quilt and other figure, or any in my expensive, tops or my hybrid tops that have epoxy resin in them. I also can use it to make my own veneers, but I'm going to take this 1/8 of an inch plywood down to 1/16 of an inch so I can use it on the end, maybe just a little thinner, so it's nice and flexible but still sturdy. I've got a brand new roll of paper on it. I'm going to turn all the stuff on and we'll make some noise. All right, the dust collector is running. Turn on the drum. Give the belt some speed. All right, that pass took it down to, took about 20 thousandths off. We're down to 106. I'm going to lower it a little more. Like I'm into the center section. All right, it's nice and flexible, but it's still a 2-ply. So I've got 2 different pieces going 90 degrees to each other. And it is down to 0.064, which is pretty much exactly a 1/16 of an inch. Let's go cut our pieces out. All right, now that I have this thinned down to a 1/16 of an inch, there's 2 layers. I'm taking the templates that I made for the holes in the side of the guitar. I've drawn a line down the center. And I'm taking these templates that I made for the holes and lining them up with the center line and then tracing around them. So I've done one, I'm just going to do the other one here. Now I'm leaving close to a 1/2 inch on the outside edge. And that's because I am going to cut these a little bigger so that and a little smaller on the inside. So the outer edge I'll cut a little bigger. And the inside edge I'll cut about 3/8 of an inch smaller, because what I want, by cutting out here and all the way around and then cutting in here and all the way around, this will glue to the inside of the guitar body, and then this will be the place where I can glue this down, the pieces that I cut, and have this act as a big giant cleat. And we're going to go from there. So I got these all, the actual dimensions drawn. Now I just got to hand draw a line on the outside, then a hand on the inside, and cut these out. So we'll come back when I have that done. I'm just going to use my saber saw to do that on a real fine setting. Or what I may do, I'm going to test this on a piece. If the saber saw, I can do the outside on my bandsaw, which will work great. Let's go over there and do that first. All right, I've got my bandsaw all ready to go. I've drawn an outer edge here, realizing that I may have to cut some of this away to the kerf when we go to the put-in, but good enough. Just gonna rough this out. Cut that out so I have a smaller piece to work with. trash can over there. All right, there's one roughed out. Go for two. All right, now the other thing I'm going to do with these is just go over and dry fit them so I know where to cut to avoid the kerfing, and then I'll sand the rough edges, and I'm also going to bevel the edges, just so we have a nice finished beveled edge. But now I'm just going to go take these over and one at a time fit them in. The other reason for drawing this, the actual outlining of the hole, is that way I'll know when I've got it good and centered. All right, so we're going to go over and just. Well, I'm going to cut the inner edge first. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll try I think I'll try dry fitting them in like this just to see how they are. All right, let's go over there. All right, I've got this one pretty closely cut to clear the kerfing. Let's just do another dry fit. Little bit more to go. All right, let me draw that line. Okay. Now I'm done using the saw on this. I'm going to go ahead and trim this up on my sander and come right back. All right, so I've got this one fitted in here. I went ahead and cut the top edge to clear the kerfing. So now I can see how much kerfing I have to work with over here. Then I'm going to cut that edge. I'm going to go cut that. We'll be right back. All right. I'm taking my time with this, make sure I get a good fit all the way around. Ooh, I think it just clicked into place. Almost. Oop, there we go. A little bit more. All right, we'll go back and forth with this a couple times, and I'll come back when I've got a good fit all the way around. All right, I've got a piece now that fits in between the kerfing. Gonna go ahead and cut the center out and get it glued into place. See you in just a little bit. All right, using some of my quick clamps, I'm fairly happy with how that's gone in. It's nice and firm. It's not bowed. It's following the curve of the guitar perfectly. I'm just on the fence if I might want to get a couple more, like 4 more of these small quick clamps and put 3 on each end, and it'd be easier to do than this, especially when I go to do the other side that's longer. I may have to have more clamps. So I may just do this one as is, because it's actually just perfect as a cleat to sit in there and make that new piece available. So I think I'm going to go ahead and glue this one up, and then get a couple more of these small ones, because I may need those when I go to do the other side, just because it's a little longer. So let's get this one glued into place, and then we'll start on the other side. Good morning. Continuing on, I've got this side. The plug is in, so I'm doing a little cleanup on this side because, when I hand cut this was a little ragged. So I've got my DuraBlock sanding block with some 120 on it, and then I've got a small sanding block here that I make out of wood, and I'm just cleaning up these edges. Trying to get them nice and straight. No high spots or low spots. And the same thing with the curve. With this, I'm just carefully It's right here, bear with me. Here's the original pattern. So I'm going to compare the hole, because I'm going to use the piece I cut out to make the piece I'm going to glue in. And it's still a little more got to come off there. I am going to do the same thing when I go to fit the pieces in, as I'm going to do a little, fine touch-up sanding to make sure I get a good tight fit on those. This is looking pretty good. What this is doing as well is getting any loose pieces broken off, so that I don't have to deal with those, but they might get in the way and get stuck in between the pieces I want to put in. Now again, I realize this is probably not the traditional way of doing this, but again, because it is a laminate side, I've seen a lot of repairs like this done where they've cut it right back all the way to the kerfing and straight, and then just put a whole piece in with just pieces inside. I just wanted to avoid having to do all that. This is going to be a little less work, save the customer some cost. Now the other thing I'm going to do is when I get ready to put the final piece in, and I've got put the back piece in now, is I'm going to use those these wire clamps, the twisty ones, to pull. I'm not going to put cleats in because that's what I've done with the other piece, to pull, anchor that thing and clamp it all down and get it in place. Then all I really have to do is just some flush sanding and prepping to spray a finish. All right, I think this is looking pretty good. I'm going to check it one more time with my original template. That actually looks close enough. There's a high spot right there. But I think yep. There's a high spot right there. I'm going to take some more off of, just to get it level and flat. It was kind of a dip in. That looks a lot better. All right. Now I'm going to clean up the piece that I cut to put in there on the back. I guess you'd call it a big circular cleat, and we'll get that glued in. See you in a bit. Quick update on this one. This hole was not as wide, so I do have a good bit of surface here to glue this up against. Thankfully on this longer piece too. Between the edge of the brake and the kerfing in there, okay? So what I've done is I've measured that. So I've got 5 mil here, 3 millimeters here, 6 millimeters and 5. I transferred those measurements onto this template, or this piece I'm gonna glue in, and now I've got my line so I can get this piece to fit in right between the kerfing, and then still have a surface to be able to glue up against here. And again, that's a good thing on this long piece because it'll give the final piece I'm gonna glue in more stability. So I'm gonna go make those cuts and start trying to, well actually I think I'll do the center first because that gives me a little more material to hold on to because that's pretty close. And then we'll come back and start fitting this in. All right, I've got this circular cleat for lack of it, but it's not really circular, it's not an ellipse. Okay, this oblong cleat. I've got it pretty much cut to the dimensions I needed. I may have cut a little bit bigger because it's always easier to take a little more off than it is to try to put stuff back on. But I'm just gonna see how it fits in between, the, a little bit tight still. I'm gonna take a little bit more, a little bit wider than I want it to be in between the kerfing. I'm going to take just a little bit more off of this side and we'll come back and try it again. All right, I took just a little bit off both sides. It now fits in between the kerfing just absolutely perfectly. So I'm ready to glue this thing into place. I think I'm gonna take just a little bit more off the ends because it's the longer piece and a little tighter curve here. I don't want this to be too far beneath, so I wanted to get, it's hard to explain what I'm talking about here. If I fit this back in, let me try it with a clamp and see how it does with a clamp. It may button right up with a clamp. Yeah, it will. So, but I'm going to take just a little bit more off the ends. I don't need that big a surface. All right, we'll come back in a little bit. I've got something else I need to do, and then I'll come back to this and we'll get this glued in. See you in a bit. All right, continuing on. This is my donor guitar. It was given to me for free to use for parts or practice repairs on or what have you. It's a JB player, so it's not anything real expensive. It does need a bridge reset, but on top of that, the guitar has really been allowed to get too dry, and around the sound hole, it's starting to buckle. It needs a neck reset. It needs a bridge reset. The top is starting to belly up and cave in the front. And not only is the top bellying up, but the laminate underneath it's deformed. So all that being said, it's somebody's trying to do epoxy the pick guard back down, and it's all over the top. So with all that being said, it's really not, worth putting the money into it to try to get it right. So what I did was I took the Takamine that I'm repairing, and I set this down underneath it, drew around it to get the shape of the side before I actually started to cut into this. And then I do the same thing if I put this down. And let me change the camera angle here a little bit. Sorry. So if I put this underneath in the same position, more or less, you may not be able to see the pencil line, but it's pretty much an exact match. So I can take a piece from this side and a piece from this side and use it to glue in, once I get it, all glued in, we'll sand all the finish off and all that. But these are going to be really, really close, if almost not exact match to the guitar that I'm working on. So I'm going to cut a lot more off than I need, just because I want to be able to find the perfect curve. But I'm going to cut, from here over, because again, this guitar is not worth saving, but it's definitely worth me using for parts. I may strip the fingerboard off it, the tuners, what have you. The bridge may be take off and reuse, but as a whole, this guitar is not worth, it was donated because it's not worth fixing. All right, I'm gonna go cut those off, and then we'll come back and do the gluing in of the other piece, the inside pleat on the Takamine. All right, what I've done now, I've got a couple of the sides cut off of that JB Player donor guitar, and I've got the kerfing removed, and being the pack rat that I am, I saved some of the binding, a couple pieces of the kerfing, just to have some pre-cut kerfing to use for, touch-up repairs in the future. And I'm a bit of a pack rat. So again, I've got these pre-bent mahogany sides, and this is also a 3-layer laminate mahogany, so that's where this will work, and I won't have to do hardly any finish repair. So what I'm going to do, what I've done is, at a 90-degree angle from the top, I put a couple pieces of tape to mark the very edges of the hole on this side, okay? So what I'm going to do is place this on there until I get wow, that's just the perfect spot right there. Whoops, all right, let's start over. Tape is likes to stick to itself and tear. So now what I'm going to do is just put some tape along this edge and the other edge of this side that I cut off of the donor guitar. Okay. I've also already taken off, as I mentioned, the binding too from these pieces, just so I don't have to deal with it. Okay, So now when I find the perfect bend where it's just perfect, I'm gonna mark those spots on this yellow tape that coordinate with the tape that I put across the top or on the side here. Okay? So now all I have to do is take a straight edge and connect those. A little more tape here. I'm gonna put a piece down the center. I can trim it later between those lines. Okay. So trim that one so I can see where my line is. Thank you very much. There we go. And that is just stinking perfect. It's almost like these two guitars were made by the same manufacturer. They might have been. Might have came out of the same factory overseas. Used to be the Matsumoto factory back in the 70s. Okay. Now, those lines match up with the inside lines on the orange tape. So now I know exactly where to cut that piece from. And also looking at it, it's just a little bit, it's about 5 degrees off center. So I can take this piece and line it up accordingly. And I've got it just a little bit off center. I'm going to mark the center lines just so I know those line up with the center line I have here. I just put it about 4 degrees off center, just like that is. All right, so now I can take a hunk of this low tack tape, pop it on there. Cut it off right there. Okay. Now I can place my template back on there, line up the center line marks, trace around it. And I have my piece to cut to fill that hole. And here we go. I'm gonna go cut it out. See you in a bit. All right, I've got a rough cut of this patch. What I did was I cut fairly close with a handheld saber saw and holding it on a block to keep it from, I don't want to have it tear out because it's hard to cut that curve, and I definitely couldn't do it on my bandsaw. I'd have had to mark the other side anyway. So what I did was I traced around the outline of my template with an X-Acto. Now I'm going to go over in my oscillating belt sander and come close to that, and then I've got it marked front and back as to which way it's going to go, and then I will slowly just fine sanding, get it to be an exact fit in there. Right now I'm going to take it over to the, my oscillating spindle sander, belt sander, and get it close. All right, I think I'm done with all the sanding. I've gone back and forth to my sander a couple times, making pencil marks each time. Got that one little rough spot there, and we're gonna put a dry fit in, and that just fell right into place. Beauty, there it is. And it's just about the exact same perfect height. Again, once I get it glued in using those clamps, now all I'm gonna do is punch a few holes. I wanna do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But at worst case, I'll do 2 on each end and then 1 in the middle, which would just be 6. I think 6 will be fine. and that'll get this thing all clamped and glued into place. And then we'll go around and do the other side. So let me get out those clamps and the glue, and we'll come back as I get ready to do this. Alrighty? All right, what I've decided I'm gonna do next is to put this piece in here on this side. I've already dry fitted it. It fits in there perfect. And I've got a whole bunch of new C-clamps to get everything in place. So I've already cleaned up all the hand sanding. So I've got a nice couple of spots on the other side were a little bit still, but I wanted to cut out as little material as possible. This one, the hole is not as wide, so I was able to get rid of all that extra wood. So I'll have and this is a bigger piece, a little cleaner, so I'll have less touch up to do. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start getting this thing glued into place. I've got all my clamps laid out here, ready to go, little 2-inch C-clamps. So the first thing to do is I'm just gonna spread some glue around the outside of this. The noise you hear in the background is the humidifiers going. It's been in the 20s here for about a week now. So yeah, the humidity outside is really down, and I've got 2 humidifiers going to keep my shop up at between 45 and 50%. And then of course when the summer rolls around, I'll be running the dehumidifier to keep it down to 50%. But I have to do that to be able to keep any instruments that come in here. I had a 1952 Martin D18 come in today that a customer just inherited, and I can't have that thing getting all dried out and cracked while it's here under my watch. All right, so that looks good. We're gonna put a clamp on each side in the middle. All right, we're gonna have to go in a little further on this one, I think. All right, I've got it. Let's go ahead and slide it down a little. No, we're good. So I'm going to put one here on this end first. This one's going to be a little trickier just because it is bigger. Get it in between there we go. So I'm going to put one right here in the middle. Back up my clamp a little. Get this thing in place. Go that way a little bit. We're not quite where I want to be yet. Get it back in between the kerfing. There we go. This side. Go here first. There we go. I have to get a little creative over here. So let's do this right here. This one, good. I'll put one more here. Let's just get this end buttoned up. A little further in, I think. That's good. Okay, now gonna need a little piece of, that'll make it work. A little piece of this right here. I think that'll set me up where I want to go. Yeah, I think so. think I may have to do a quick clamp on this. Oh, there we go. That got it. Okay. And one more piece like that. A very big one, just a little bit of an offset. Put it on this side in the middle. Good. That looks good. Now we'll do this end, and then we'll let it dry. Getting some nice little bits of glue squeeze out. Perfect, perfect. And those will all clean up when we're done. All right, I'm going to clean up some of the glue squeeze out now, just because. Got a paper towel here. Just going to take, where is it? I've got a little flat blade around here somewhere. Time to clean the bench up. There we go. So I'm just going to clean up some of this glue squeeze out. So there's a little bit. Good. A little bit right there. Good. Whoops. Good. Alrighty. Let's let this dry, and then we'll start gluing on the pieces. To fill it in the sides. See you in a little bit. Alright. In the process of taking the clamps off here, on this, the big oval cleatish monstrosity. So we'll get the clamps off. That all looks good. I don't need these measurements anymore. That's all done. I can take this tape off. Something else that I do is whenever I put tape on like this, I always fold over the end and tape it to itself, so that gives me a tab to remove, so I don't have to pick at the finish. It may not be a big deal on a guitar like this. It's older and has a lot of battle scars from being played and loved. But you know, when you're taping off around on a more expensive guitar for whatever, you know, whatever you're doing, even with the low tack tape, I really don't want to dig at it with my fingernail, because some of those finishes can be damaged pretty easily. Hang on, I'm going to turn the radio down. Hang on. I always have some kind of music going in the background. So this looks good. I still need to cut the piece out we're going to fill in here, but this looks good. So what I'm going to do now is flip it over, and I'll show you how I put these cleats in. Not cleats rather, but the things to clamp it. And we'll go ahead and do one. So I've already got a piece of wire cut. Where's my little poker thing? Okay, then I have this that has a thin piece of, it's like a cut-off needle in it. And I'm going to use this to poke a hole through that cleat right on the end there. All right, there it is. To put this wire through. Now this is 15 gauge steel wire, or 15 thousandths of an inch. So it's like the, you know, B string on an acoustic guitar. So I feed that through. And I'm also guilty of cutting a longer piece than I need, just because I like to have extra to work with. So I feed a bunch of it through. Now I've got this brass ferrule that has holes, one up through the center and one through the side. So I'm going to feed the wire up through the center first. And I like to pull about a good 6 inches extra. Then we're going to put it through this. Once through, I like to go 3 times through the side to side. So I get it fed through, take my pliers and pull it tight. I'm going to go around and go through again and pull it tight. I bent the end, so I'm going to try to straighten that. I don't like to get it bent. Pull it straight through. I'm going to go one more time around. Give myself a little extra slack here. This is the same process I use a lot of times when I'm repairing a crack in a side or the top of an acoustic guitar. The last thing I do then, I feed it back through the original one. And I realize I'm probably doing more than I need, but I really don't want this to slip when I'm doing the work, okay? But I'm just gonna cut off a bunch of the extra, but I'll leave a little bit hanging, an inch or two, and then I like to bend that over on itself. The reason I bend this over on itself and make a little loop at the end is when I reach in at the end to pull these off, because sometimes they'll get a little glue on them and they'll stick, is I really want to try to avoid getting stabbed with the wire. It's gonna happen, but if I can cut it down from getting stabbed 3 times to getting stabbed once, I figure that's a win. And the last thing I'm gonna do is just take a piece of tape. As I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna fold the end over to give myself a pull tab. I'm gonna pull that thing taut and tape it to just the side of the guitar here. I'm doing this so that they're out of my way as I put them on. Okay, now I've got this piece cut from that donor guitar. I labeled it front and back. We're just gonna make sure the wire, it fits in there without hitting. Yep, we're good. So now I'm gonna put some glue on this edge, put this in, and I'm using these clamps. These are ones that I bought from Stu Mac, but I modified them to put locking tuners on. The reason I like the locking tuners is with the old ones, I've got glue that's trying to set up, and I'm trying to get that wire, it was a mess. So what I did with locking tuners is I just pull the wire through, straight, tighten this down, and I'm ready to cut it off, I'm ready to go. It saves me a ton of time. The other thing I always do though before I put the glue on is I make sure that the hole is straight up and down so I can pull the wire straight through, and I also have the post backed off to make sure that I can get the wire through. Sometimes they're a little, you back this up and you gotta tap them to get that post to drop. The other thing I've done is because some of these are just used tuners and some are for the right side of the headstock, some are the left, I've marked a direction with an arrow that shows me which way to tighten when I need to tighten it so I don't have to guess, okay? So I've got all of these ready to go, probably more than I need, but I don't want this thing to shift and pop after it's been all put together. So we're gonna put some glue on the surface here, on this, I guess we're gonna call this a donut cleat maybe, right? Some glue on this. Okay. That all looks good. Now I'm going to fit this in. I've labeled it front and back. Again, I think we covered that. Put this in place. I'm going to do a hand push, and just to wipe up any squeeze out that's coming up. So just hand pressure, get rid of the squeeze out. I'm not too worried about it because this is all going to get sanded anyway when I go to blend it in. So I'm just going to start putting clamps on. I guess I'll start with the last one I did. So pull the tape off, feed the wire up through, pull it tight, clamp it down, cut off the excess, and start tightening. On these, just for the sake of speed, I like to use these speed winders. turn this one around to do it the other way. There we go. Good. Next one. Make sure I got the right one here, and that's where the tab helps. I just pull the wire off. Feed it up through. So these I'm going to alternate so I can get to the post. Pull it up tight. Tighten down the post. Cut off the excess. And give it a few cranks. That one looks like it. No, we're good. We're good. Okay. Now, just for fun, I'm going to put one on the other end because that end is starting to lift up. So pull the tape, feed the wire up through, and everything I've done here, all part of my process is to be able to get this done quickly, including the locking tuners as a modification, before the glue really starts to set up. All right, cut the excess off. Tighten that one down. I don't have to think about which way to go because of my marks. Okay, good. Next one. We'll work on that end some more. A couple of these I had to make myself out of wood. Most guys make their own, and I made a couple extras rather than ordering more. We'll get to those. Feed the wire through. Tighten down the post. Bend over the excess and cut it off. All right, you get the idea of how this is done. I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off, finish these couple more up. Then I'm going to go cut the piece that's going to go on the other side, so when this dries and I take the clamps off, I can do the other one. See you in a little bit. All right, it's been over 24 hours. Going to go ahead and start taking these clamps off. Have a look at this side. These don't fit as well into the... A little harder to use this on these, the big ones. Loosen this and off we go. Whoop. Off we go. Uh-oh, heard the dogs coming down the stairs. Shop dogs. Hey, Angus. And again, the patch that I put in on this side, the piece, it did have a few little gaps around it. When I removed the old broken stuff, I wanted to cut as little as possible out, just because it was very close to, if not right up to the kerfing. And I knew, of course, I'd be doing some filling in, probably epoxy filling in around the edges. But there you have it. Now all I have to do is what I like to do on these to pull the... Hang on, I'm going to have to move the camera just a bit and then bring it right back. What I like to do to take these out is take a small pair of needle nose and hold them on the wire just about 1/8 of an inch or so above the surface and start pushing it back through. It just helps to loosen it up. There we go. And then all I have to do now on this side, of course, to pull the the brass things out, I can reach in from the other hole, but also typically I go up to the sound hole and then just pull them through. Also, what I will usually do, I'll do it on the next one here, is we'll push this middle one through, is I'll push it through, and then I will take my cutter and cut the wire off just because it's got bends in it. And there, that one just fell right off. That way, when I pull it through, if the wire has kinks, it doesn't damage around the edges of the crack I'm sealing. On this guitar, it doesn't make a lot of difference because again, I'm going to have to go back in and seal this up. Probably with going to mix up some black epoxy. But when you're doing the crack on the top of a guitar, you don't want to pull that wire through and have it make that hole bigger, which means you'd see it. So again, just going to push these through. Go ahead and push them all through and then cut them off. And then I'll just go pull the brass ferrules out and we'll get ready to do the other side. That one's loose, that one's loose, this one is loose. Yep, so I'm just going to go through and cut them all off so there's not as much wire to pull through. And to trash those go. And then again, just reach up to the sound hole. Sometimes if the brass ferrules are really where I can't reach them, the holes on the end where I put the wire through, I'll put a little piece of string and hang it out, so that gives me something to reach in and pull to get the brass ferrules loose. Again, with this first side, if I couldn't get to the sound hole, I could always reach through the other side, which I might have to do on one or two of these. All right, we're down to one left and I'm having a little trouble reaching. So I'm just going to go ahead and go in through the other side and get it. Oh, just for fun, I also kept a bunch of the big pieces that came out of this guitar for the customer. Don't know if she wants them, but for posterity, she might. So we're going to go ahead and pull those out, come in and cut a piece for this side, and have that one in. See you in a little bit. All right, carrying on with the repairs on this Takamine where they'd been kicked in. I've got that piece is all in, and the clamps are off on this one side, and then I did fill in around the edges with some black epoxy just for those couple of spots that were a little bit of didn't quite fit perfectly. Again, I'm trying to keep the time involved and therefore the cost down for this customer. And then now I went across to originally, when I put the epoxy on, I had a thin piece of wood that I was scraping it in so I wouldn't have that much to sand down. Any of the high spots, I hit them with this file to knock them down a little. Now I'm using a block of, just a small wooden block with some 220 and just going around the edges and making sure I can get everything level. There's a little bit of, there were a couple little spots where that were real small, and so I just filled those with Glue Boost. And if you're not familiar with the Glue Boost, what it is it's an accelerant the main thing I use is an accelerant for super glue. So for little bitty dots, little bitty pings and stuff in the finish, put a drop of super glue in, hit it with some Glue Boost, and it hardens that fast so you can sand it. For these that had gaps, little bitty, I was using the Glue Boost fill and finish. So a drop of this on there, hit it with the accelerant, and then I can sand it immediately. So that's the final touches here with these couple little spots that I'm just gonna try to get down and smooth with the rest of the finish. And as discussed, rather than trying to mix up a finish that's going to be a match, this dark bluish green is almost black, so I am just gonna, she calls it her black green Takamine, so we're gonna just finish this area with some black lacquer to cover it up. But you're going to be able to see where the repair was because it's a different color, kind of like how some people do with headstocks with a broken headstock. Even though it may have been a clear lacquer finish, they spray a little black, or if it's a reddish mahogany, they spray some red over that area to cover up the repair, to hide it. So I'm just going to put black lacquer on this. There are places that will custom mix a couple of rattle cans for you, but they typically do opaque paint rather than a translucent clear finish. And rather than going to all the trouble of trying to mix stuff up, I'm just going to use, the easily available black lacquer, gloss lacquer from like StewMac. Just because that stuff is a custom mix, it usually ends up being about 120 bucks a can. And she's not that concerned about the finish. She just wants the guitar to be structurally sound, and you know, there's a bunch of other dings and stuff that we're not going to bother with. This guitar shows its age. So again, I'm just knocking down the high spots, trying to blend everything in as best I can. Once I think I've got it really close, we're going to put a thin coat of lacquer on it. And then any more high spots or low spots that show up there, then we'll continue to knock it down and block sand until I get it really level. Okay. And this is looking pretty good. Before I do hit it, you know, with the spray, I'm going to probably go over it with some 320. I'm doing 220 now. We'll do some 320 and then some 400, maybe up to 600, and then we'll put some black lacquer on it, see how it looks. I'm going to come back when we finish up here, and then we're going to come back and look at putting the patch in the other side. So see you in a little bit. All right, first phase of sanding is done here. I suspect once I put some black paint on it, you're going to see maybe a high spot there or right here, but that's part of doing the, you know, if this were a solid finish, you'd put down a primer first and then sand the primer. But I'm just going to go ahead and put the black lacquer on after I do a little more finer grit sanding. This is how it's done after the 220. It feels good, it looks really good, but again, there might be one or two not high spots or low spots per se that are, you can feel them, but once the paint is on, boy, you'll see, especially black, boy, you'll see them. And then we'll put a couple coats on and continue to block sand to get it down. But now, next up is starting on this side. Alrighty, let's get started on that. I'm gonna go cut this piece and then we'll get started on this area.